So between this episode and the last episode, I did some work, but unfortunately wasn't able to record it because my camera was being repaired at the time. Here, all that I did was glue the top hexagon and the bottom hexagon so that there was no cracks between where I had bent them, and also so the two ends of the straight piece of aluminium angle before it was bent were then glued together. After this, I then rebuilt the case because of course I dismantled it when I used the JB Weld. And as soon as I'd done that, I was able to use a test fit, which is some paper, with the motherboard to scale to be able to somewhat see how the computer's going to fit inside the case. This is essentially just holding it all up and just looking with my eye. I did the same, but I actually used a real graphics card. This is just a throwaway graphics card I happen to own, and it allows me to somewhat see how that's going to fit and how much clearance I'll need. I did a few marks on the case to actually show where it would be, although this is all sort of might be used or might not be used. Once I'd done this, it was actually time to start making the motherboard mount. So first off, I started with two straight pieces of steel, which I taped to the case. This would show me where I needed to then drill in to attach these to the case. Later on, I would actually cut these down and sand them so they're flush and look a bit nicer, but that wasn't necessary at this precise moment. I decided to drill through both the case and the piece of mount together. This allowed me to, when I actually tapped it, I could then put screws straight through and there'd be no sort of problems with interference. I should have done this early on the case, but unfortunately I didn't think of that. Then of course I tapped these holes I drilled and then I put a screw through them to hold the metal in place. For the other side, I used the same sort of concept, but I had to bend the ends of the mount to 60 degrees so it went with the curvature of the case. To do this, I made a small groove in the steel using my Dremel. Then once I'd done that, I could get a hammer and actually bend the metal. Unfortunately, you can't really bend steel very easily without doing this groove in it. It's kind of unfortunate, but it was a small setback. In the end, I'm going to have to put JB Weld along the outside of this as well, just to make sure that it is still strong. I then drilled holes in this and the case, attached it all together with screws again, and then I did the final bit of clearing everything up, sanding down the edges, ensuring everything was flush and looked good. Now this was done, I was able to start doing measurements for where the motherboard will actually go. So I'm measuring out at the moment where the motherboard tray will go, and this is completely based off how much room I think the graphics card will need. As in the end of the day, more room for the motherboard is going to be better, as then I'm going to have less limitations when it comes to coolers when I actually build a computer in here. For the mount, I started off using the angles because I still had some left, and I would use this, cut it down to the correct size, and then eventually the motherboard tray would actually be mounted to this. I also cut out a small section of the angles. This would allow me to bend the ends of the angle, and then this would then be where the screws are put in to hold these in place. Unfortunately, I didn't have any spare motherboard trays lying around, so I managed to grab an old computer case I had, and I would use a motherboard tray of this. This does a number of things. So first off, it allows me to put one awkwardly placed mount for the motherboard on the actual case rather than leaving it empty. And it also means I don't need to accurately measure and drill the holes for the motherboard tray. This would be particularly difficult, and I was in fact very lucky to have this just lying around. I measured up and marked out where I would need to cut the motherboard tray, and then using my Dremel I etched around everything and then would bend it until the metal essentially snapped. I measured out and cut slightly too big, as I knew that I would probably have to sand it down afterwards, and then if I got any errors anywhere, I could easily just sand it down and actually get something accurate and usable. With this complete, I then did a small test fit with a piece of paper. This allowed me to test if the motherboard tray had been bent significantly out of place. Of course, there were some bends which I managed to get out with a hammer. And finally, with this complete, I managed to use the aluminium angles I made earlier, and I drilled through them and the motherboard tray at the same time, tapped the holes which I drilled, and finally put a screw in, which allowed the motherboard tray to actually have some sort of strength. And of course, with a finishing touch, once I tested everything out, I then sanded down the screws and around any edges of the motherboard tray which I felt were a bit out of place or sharp, so I didn't end up cutting myself on it. The motherboard tray could then be screwed into the case. So this, of course, meant drilling through the outer of the case and the motherboard tray itself. And then, of course, I would need to then tap these holes and put a screw in them. And this brings us to the final piece for the end of this video. Unfortunately, this is actually going to be the last video for some time about my computer case building, because unfortunately I have now gone to university and I don't have the case or the tools with me in order to work on it. I'm hoping to return around Christmas time with the part 3 and potentially part 4, depending on how much work this is to do. What there is actually left now is making a graphics card mount, a power supply mount, fan mounts, and then putting the side panels on. And then once I've done all of that, dismantle the entire case and paint it. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you did, a like would be much appreciated. If you didn't, then sure, put a dislike, but also put in the comments down below why you didn't like it, and I could perhaps change this for a future video. If you want to see more of my videos, then subscribe to my channel. It's the best way to do that, as I put all of my videos in your subscription feed once they're released. And yeah, thank you for watching, and goodbye.